got something?
Guess who wrote it? Guess who wrote it?
You did not write my speech. If you don't understand that.
That stuff, that stuff he said this morning, the stuff that I said when we was answering the question, that's what that is. If anything, that thing was, Dylan didn't agree with anything I said because I was really against religion, but I kept saying like I'm
wait.
I sent it to her.
Leadership team. Huh? Yeah, she sent it to you, Keyshawn,
Yeah. But let me find out how much she gonna charge for this.
Your coworkers can't do nothing right. They need to change that Sprite. I mean, gave me a whole cup full of seltzer.
It was straight. Friday be 3 weeks. Look, it's about to
What I told you, I told you somebody was gonna say
He
that.
said it. He said somebody was like, you ain't there. I was like, I ain't gonna have to. I had to get them in off.
Already turned in my.
She just said that. She said she got it going for them.
Where you think you got it from? Michaela, bringing salads in jars. No, Michaela loved to make them salads in a jar. Leave the jar there for a week. Have the dressing smell like who done it and why.
Yeah, because we cook for like, we used to cook for 6 people, so we cook for 6, making 4 people eat.
It's all at the post office. It's all at the post office. You walk in looking just as mad as ever. Smell like
back out. Chair will entertain a motion to exit executive session, which no action was taken.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion, we exit executive session with no actions taken.
Pastor Jackson, been motion by Ms. Harrison, second by Pastor Jackson, exit executive session. All in favor indicate by raising your right hand. That's 7-0. Thank you. All right, welcome to everybody again. Welcome to the April, I think it's April, right? Still April? Okay. It's zipping by. All right. At this time, we will have the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence.
I was staying for the pledge of allegiance. Moment of silence. Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda will be the approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we approve the agenda as it presented.
Thank you, ma'am.
I second it, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, sir. Motion by Ms. Harrison, second by Mr. Miller, to approve the agenda. Any discussion on that? No discussion. All those in favor of approving the agenda indicate by raising your right hand. That's 7-0. Thank you. Public comment.
Yes, we have two, Dr. Dallas Garrett's, topic, technical training possibilities. You go up first, and then we have Nikki Morgan, STEM forward to the same trip. 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I have been working with Randy Sisk for probably more than a year on this specific project. And I listed my address as Florida because that's where I came from today, but I'm moving it. And I have an address here, if you need it. We have talked about the need for technical education, specifically short-term, to get people jobs. And I happen to have almost 50 years at specifically as the dean of 6 major colleges and a vice president. Colleges with 50,000 enrollments per year. And we have a concept that we think is fairly unique, but it's similar to something I've done in the past. And what we're asking, and we labeled our new organization as Palmetto Technical Institute of Fairfield County. And we are requesting a home. And specifically, we are asking for a very reasonable lease of the Gordon Odyssey Academy building. I've driven around it, I have not been in it, but I've spent a lifetime in education, and I've also worked with institutions that we created out of a Lowe's building, for example, up in Virginia. And within our request, and we'd like it for a fairly long term, probably minimum 5 years, and I requested this and received a request similar to this. We're saying for $1 per year, and that sounds, like a very good deal for us, but it takes a good deal to get something started like this. And we would immediately develop programs and a business incubator facility. The business incubator facility is something a lot of people don't understand, and it's not for every business. About 1 out of 10, in fact, will really start up properly in a business incubator, because most businesses need visibility. I guess I've started more than 100 business incubators across this country. Normally I have an 8-hour presentation and they pay me $2,000. So this is a little unique for me. But we would develop the training programs, mostly short term. Some would be up to a year. We'll work very closely with Fairfield, WIOA, and the South Carolina Boat Rehab to develop programs that meet their funding requirements. I will personally apply for grants and donations for hardware, software, machinery, furniture, and this is something that I've been very successful at. I put a list together recently, and my list is totals over $253 million that I've received in donations and consignments for these programs. In colleges, I typically had to offer these programs from midnight till 8 in the morning because our colleges were full during regular hours. And I think this is something that would work very well in this area. I was asked to come here in 1992 to save the business. And I ended up staying 11 years. My last 5, I operated a manufacturing business here, made composites, and did primarily military work. I think we've given you a handout that, do they have that lists some of the possible training programs that we would put together, and you could see we would need equipment. I taught computer-aided design, computer-aided manufacturing for 16 years in college, and you need very sophisticated equipment to do that. And I would acquire all of the equipment for all of the programs at no cost to anybody. I have those partners.
We have 5 minutes.
Okay. Okay, I think I've pretty much given you a summary. Yes, sir.
Can I say?
Dangerous in public comment.
No, have y'all been to county council?
Have we what? I'm sorry.
Been to county council with this?
No.
We haven't been to county. We're your first.
Yes.
That's
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Do we know what this young man was gonna be speaking, presenting to us this afternoon? Do we know he was gonna be talking to us about this proposal? I guess I'm concerned because normally something like this would not be part of public comment. It would be on the agenda as a presentation so that, they would have enough time to present the item to the board so that we can have ample time to consider it and decide.
I think we're now aware of it, so if there's further conversation about it, I think we can put it on the agenda.
I guess the concern is, I don't know where he's traveling from, but if they're coming here tonight for public comment, and then if we would like for them to come back again later on and do a more full-fledged presentation, then, so I guess my request is in the future, if we could know what is going through public comment, and if it's something that they were requesting of the board, it really should be on the agenda, so they can have more than the 5 minutes, and then we can ask questions and get as much information as we can.
Yes, ma'am, I agree. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Nikki Morgan.
you imagine your child engaging in a world that's beyond our classroom walls and beyond our community. Imagine them stepping outside of their comfort zone for a second and experiencing new people, foods, and culture. Imagine them receiving an experience that could possibly make them stand out on their college and job applications. Imagine them learning how to navigate new experiences with confidence and being able to embrace diversity by understanding cultural differences. Lastly, I ask you to imagine your child being able to experience a life-changing journey. Well, our students here at Fairfield County School District have this opportunity. This summer, they will be traveling to, a group of 15 will be traveling to Spain to represent STEM Cohort 2. They have either raised or paid over $36,800 for this experience. We, myself, and other parents is asking the board if they would approve the district to assist with the remaining balance of $26,200 to afford our children this opportunity of the experience I asked you to imagine. With your investment, I am sure that the community, the students, the parents, and myself would be forever grateful for the opportunity that you allow these children that many of us in Fairfield County can only imagine. Thank you.
Does that conclude public comment for this evening?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, it looks like the next thing that we have on the.
Before you
Yes, ma'am.
leave that, when would they need a decision on the funding?
There are probably some deadlines I'm not totally aware of, Ms. McDaniel. The trip is in June, I think it is. And so probably within, the next month or so, we need to start finishing up some balances.
So they give us exact deadline, because if it's before the next board meeting, then we need to make a decision on it tonight, do we not?
About April 29th?
April 29th.
April 20th. That's next Friday. Sunday. 2 weeks.
Pardon me?
2 weeks, she said April 29th. 8.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Is that, we didn't pretty much voted on the agenda, so how can we, I think, what we need to do, I guess, I have no problem, with our children having the best, I'm just trying to figure out how we get there, because, maybe it might be the next time that, somebody will come. I wish this would have been on the agenda, I'm like Daniel, the previous, I wish it would have been on the agenda, so we can deal with it actually tonight.
I understand. We can only put on the agenda what we're aware is going to be presented to us too, so.
I wish.
Now, does anybody recall, I know last year we had an issue with it, similar to this. Do you recall what we did in that situation?
So I'm glad you made note of that, Mr. Frick. Last year, the parents came to a public comment. They did the same thing as they did today. What the board gave the directions to do is to locate the funding to meet the parents' requests. And so this is quite honestly in line with what transpired this past year. And so I feel the board can give me the same directions if that is a pleasure. Is it a motion or just
I would put it either under the board chair's report or either under the superintendent's report. And then after this particular meeting, so that we don't have the same issue in the future, we put guidelines in place for the staff at the middle school and high school or all the schools, so So when, they have an idea of when they need to bring the information to you, if they need additional assistance from the board, and then you bring it to, so it can be brought to the board in a timely manner, and we're not caught off guard. But for purposes of this one, I think it can come in under either one of y'all's report, and then board vote.
And so last year, Ms. McDaniel, it wasn't an official vote. I mean, the board just, it was out to consensus that the board wanted me to move forward with trying to identify the funding. So we didn't actually vote on it last year.
But it still would need to be in the minutes as a, even as a consensus item under somebody's report somewhere.
I believe even though we've approved the agenda, the Robert's Rules allows us to amend the agenda if we have a supermajority.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we amend the agenda to take up the issue of the request coming from the high school. The high school?
Yeah.
STEM cohort 2 trip to Spain, due to the timeliness of when the funds are needed.
Is there a second, Ms. McDaniel, to the motion?
I would second that.
Mr. Miller gets a second on that. All right. All those in favor of amending the agenda to add the STEM Cohort 2's funding request under, what did you say, the superintendent? I want to make sure I state your motion
Yes, sir.
correct. On the superintendent's report, indicate by raising your right hand. I believe we got a supermajority, and thank you for not making me have to do that math. All right, we will make that adjustment. Thank you. Next item on the agenda will be student readmission request. This is what we discussed in executive session. Of course, there wouldn't be any further discussion on that. Chair will entertain any motion regarding that. If there is no motion, the current situation will stand. Seeing no motion, no action will be taken. Thank you. Next is board minutes. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the board minutes for the March 13th meeting.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion we accept the superintendent recommendation to approve the board minutes for the regular board meeting March 13th. Providing I get a second.
Well, I thought you were going to provide if there are any corrections.
Providing if there's any corrections.
And I second.
What they said. Okay, so all motion by Ms. Harrison, seconded by Mr. Miller, to approve the March 13th board minutes, providing any corrections are noted.
I just got one clarification, Mr. Chairman. I see y'all had some lengthy conversation since I wasn't at the last meeting. And
We missed you.
you ain't in the minutes.
I thought we put in the minutes.
Go ahead and let's go on without it. I thought it was clear that when we left the last meeting that I agreed to change the meeting because I would be given the opportunity to participate on the phone. I didn't know that I had to send anything as a reminder that I needed to participate. So I just want the minutes to reflect that I was absent due to the fact of a misunderstanding, that I did not know I had to send something to request that I be on the phone because the decision was already made at the previous board meeting.
Yes, ma'am. And as I recall, what you said was you wasn't sure whether you're going to be able to participate, which is why I was expecting you to follow what the procedure says, which is if you're going to be able to participate, you would notify me or the superintendent, and I received no notification. I understand the miscommunication. I'm just clarifying what my
I would
stance
never
was.
agree to it if I could have participated, because you know I don't miss board meetings unless I just absolutely cannot help it.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We did miss you, though. We always miss you, ma'am. All right. All right.
Ms. Harrison said she did.
Yes,
Dr. Green.
No, we haven't voted on the minutes. All right. Anything further on the minutes at this time? No.
I just want that reflected in the minutes, that's all.
Okay. If there's nothing further,
On that particular case also, I had requested to actually call her because as it states in the.
and again, based on what I said, I denied your request.
Right, you did deny.
Okay? So that's,
That was mean and cool.
it's a tough job to have a gavel sometimes. Can't make everybody happy. All right.
Remember from previous, and it should have been in the minutes.
All right. I think we have dealt with that situation. Any further discussion on minutes other than that topic? All right. All those in favor of approving the minutes from March 13th, please indicate by raising your right hand.
With the noted addition.
With the, well,
Oh, correction.
with Ms. McDaniel's correction. Did you fill out the form? We got a form? You're the one who talks about policy, Ms. McDaniel. I'm just trying to follow our policy.
That is not part of the house, so we don't need that from.
It is. But anyway, all right.
I will
With
check
your,
it out.
thank you, ma'am. All right. But we do note your statement for the record.
All right, thank you.
Any further? With Ms. McDaniel's notation for the record, approval of the minutes, all those in favor indicate by raising your right hand. 7-0, thank y'all. Superintendent's report.
Chairman, Frick, members of the board, I'll start with the item that was recently added, which was the STEM Cohort 2 funding request for the Spain trip. My recommendation that the board fulfill their request for 23,000, just say 23,000. I can't remember. What's the number? 23,000? Oh. It was 26,000.
Well, you gonna give me this one anyway, right?
Mr. Chair. Yes, sir. My question is that rather than make that 26, let's just say, let's say,
Remaining balance.
remaining balance. That's what we need to say.
Thank you.
Is that your motion? Who's making the motion?
That's my motion.
Mr. Miller is making the motion that we approve the remaining balance to be paid for STEM Cohort 2's trip. Okay, do we have a second on that?
Yeah, I'm saying.
Give that one to Pastor Jackson there. I think he beat you out of the blocks on that one. Okay. All right, so it's been motioned and seconded to pay the remaining balance for STEM Cohort 2's trip to Spain. Any discussion on that matter?
What's the amount that they raised?
36,800.
Over half of it.
36,800?
And
Thank you.
for my recollection, I believe that is very, very similar to the same situation that Cohort 1 was in last year when we did the same thing.
That's all right.
I would echo what Ms. McDaniel said is perhaps in the future, because this is going to come up every year, I believe. And we want to be helpful, but we probably do need some kind of guidelines so we don't find ourselves in the April meeting having to amend the agenda to vote on stuff. Any further discussion on that? I wasn't particularly looking at you, Ms. McDaniel. I was looking at the table, I'm sorry. She thinks I'm staring at her.
I think if we brought it up to them, come back and then have some kind of report for us, it'd be nice.
I'm sure they'll be happy to report back to their visit from Spain. All right, good deal. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of granting the request, indicate by raising your right hand. I believe that's 7-0. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, before you move on, may I ask, how many students in the audience? I always appreciate when the students come out and make requests and stand for what y'all believe in, so y'all continue to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
You gonna say that? Bring us some back.
That's why I was
What size do you wear?
We have I'm gonna talk about that, we have 11 students in total. So, Chairman Frick, members of the board, I just wanted to remind you that the Hall of Fame Gala is May 5th at Fairfield Central High School at 6 p.m. Always a very quality event. Ms. Wallace does an excellent job putting that together. So if that's not on your calendar, please put that on your calendar. And finally, as Ms. Hartman alluded to a second ago, we will graduate our first cohort of the STEM College Academy on May 9th at 6 p.m. I was at a meeting earlier today with some representatives from Midlands Technical College, and they wanted to make sure that I was going to be there. Even Ms. McDaniel asked me would I be willing to sit on the stage, and so I didn't ask for that. They
You
just,
said, no, I'm letting this man.
yeah, I said I'm gonna let Ms. McDaniel sit on the stage. But I think I'm probably pretty safe in saying, and I'll wait and see when this happens, that Fairfield Central High School will have more students to graduate with a degree than any other student in the Midlands. So the graduation is at, I ain't right where it is, Ms. McDaniel.
I think they said Colonial.
Colonial Center.
Yeah, Colonial Center. She gave
It's
us a date, but I forgot what she said Colonial Center. When is it?
No, it's May 9th at 6
May
p.m.
9th?
Yeah, May 9th, that should be on a Tuesday.
Are we going to invite,
You can,
just anybody?
you can.
Oh, yeah, anyone can come. And so our plan is to have the entire, all cohorts attend graduation. And so we are up to our 7th Stillman Early College Academy cohort. And so our plan is to have all 7 cohorts attend graduation so they can see the culmination of this very exciting opportunity. And it is a lot of work, as the students here could probably attest to, but I want them to see that it is well worth all the effort that you put in.
Then we're regular black robes or
You see, what will they wear?
the graduates?
I'm not sure about that. I think they wear regular black clothes. Well, last time, Ms. Frick, I just printed a normal suit bow tie, so that's my game plan this year as well.
But with that doctoral outfit, you work hard with it.
I did work hard for it. But Chairman Frick, that's all I have. Oh, excuse me, yeah. And then the final thing is the McCoy Listening School of Technology cafeteria. During the last meeting, I think it was the last meeting, we had a gentleman to present to the board in a public comment, making a request that we name the McCoy Listening School of Technology cafeteria after Ms. Wilson, who served, I think, 30+ years as the cafeteria manager there. What I have shared with you is a copy of the naming facilities policy guidelines. When I had a conversation with this gentleman, I told him that I had no idea what the procedures were to make such a request or to name a facility, because I've not had the pleasure of doing that during my tenure as superintendent. I'm not sure when the last time we've done that, but we hadn't done it in the last 6 years. As you see, a part of that process is to establish a committee to even evaluate the request of naming a facility. It has to have board members, students, as you see, PTA presidents, business partners. So it is a relatively involved process if we're going to stick to the guidelines established in the policy. Another thing that you'll notice here is that the person or his or her family, in case they are deceased, must give approval before moving forward with naming a facility. And even though I've heard from the gentleman who's made that request, I've not had a conversation with Ms. Wilson. And so I'm not sure exactly what her thoughts are on the request. And so I would probably say before we get to the point of even establishing any committees and talking about that process, I probably need to have a conversation with Ms. Wilson to see whether this is something that she's even interested in pursuing. So I wanted to bring this information to the board after the request made during last meeting, so you can see exactly what the policies and procedures are relative to naming a facility. And so I'll await any guidance that you have in that regard.
So what you gave us, is this the policy that we have in place now?
Yeah, this is the current policy, Ms. McDaniel. And as you can see, this policy goes back to 1997. So it hadn't been modified or amended in quite a while.
They must have had them. 'Cause I know, 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 I know
hearing correctly, the recommendation has already been made to name this particular cafeteria after Ms. Wilson, and you're asking us to look at the policy, or, because if you're gonna name committees and they've already made that recommendation, then that recommendation be null and void, and we'll be looking at what the committee.
So Mr. McDaniel, so no one has made a recommendation. What has happened is a gentleman from the community approached the board last meeting and made that request. And so the board.
He specifically wanted to name that, I'm sorry for that.
Yeah. So he specifically was making that request of the board. So
Okay.
no one has endorsed his request.
Okay.
I'm simply providing you information in terms of what's the policy relative to doing that. Because I suspect most board members were like me and were not aware that such naming policy existed. So before the board attempts to potentially act on the request, I felt it prudent to at least notify the board that there is a policy in place that really addresses the naming of facilities.
Yeah, 'cause I think the last two named was the magnet school and probably the last one, I'm not sure what process we use. But if we're using this process, are you asking us to endorse that for you to move forward, or?
Well, so the question is, this is the policy and procedure relative to naming. A request was made from a gentleman in the community of the board. The board can give you direction at this point. What I have said is, I think it would probably be prudent to at least start with having a conversation with Ms. Wilson to see whether this is something that she wants to pursue. But the board can give me, other directions if you like.
I think we probably need to follow what we have in policy.
Okay.
And, I doubt very seriously anybody else's name will come up against hers, but at least we would have followed what we have in policy, and then if we need to change it and make any changes, because I can almost guarantee you McCoy Listen is probably coming, and Giga is probably coming.
So you say McCoy Listen is coming, what do you mean?
Not McCoy Listen, Giga and, Kelly Miller.
Well, and so obviously, as the board moves forward, Ms. McDaniel, these are obviously considerations.
I mean, I have a problem with it. I'm just saying, let's just follow the policy so that we have something structured in place.
So what you're saying is, because obviously you would have to do an individual committee per school. And so since they are requesting that the facility, specifically the cafeteria at McCoy Liston, be named after Ms. Wilson, then you would have to establish a committee at McCoy Liston.
Right.
And so is the sentiment that I move forward with trying to establish a committee? Is that what you're?
That's what I would think. I mean, what everybody else. That's our area, but we.
Well, it would seem like, we have a policy in place. I think we want to follow the policy. And I think we want to honor a request if we can do that, but we need to do it within the confines of policy. So I don't know if we necessarily need to vote on anything. I think we're just saying follow the policy.
Right.
Is that what I'm hearing from the board? Okay.
Well, and so I just want to be clear, Chairman Frick, but before we move forward with doing anything relative to policy, I think the first step is to have some dialogue with Ms. Wilson. Okay. Yeah. If you read Ms. McDaniel, that is a part of the policy. What it says specifically is the person or his or her family, in case he or she is deceased, must approve the naming of the facility for this individual.
But would it not be though after the committee make the decision?
Yeah, so what I'm saying is, I don't think it would be prudent to say, pull a committee together, have discussions about naming a facility after her, and then approach her about the naming of the facility. Because if she's not in favor of it, there would be no need to have a committee.
Yes, it would, because if she doesn't want to name that person, then they want to name it after somebody else.
But yeah, the whole purpose of, so yeah, we are considering multiple names. The only name the committee would be considering, Ms. McDaniel, is that specific request.
Okay, I need to read this.
But Two things, I think we agree we want to follow the policy, and the policy as written says you have to consult with the family or the person. So I don't know that they're mutually exclusive. I think if there's a conversation with the person, then you can go forward with naming the superintendent, go forward with naming the committee.
I'm fine with that, Mr. Chair. But it says when we're going to approve the name of this.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Reverend Jackson.
Then the contact, I'm gonna approve this name. So,
Then the committee will bring it forward. I can almost guarantee you.
Okay.
But we would have followed a policy, so when he would come and Kelly will come,
Sure.
we have some structure in what we're doing.
I agree, and I want to make sure we set up a structure, because I agree with you. Once one,
Yeah, but I
we're going to get all of them.
Kelly will gonna be.
Well, it sounds like there's a motion down there. If you want to make that motion. Okay. Well, like I said, I think I don't know that we need to make a motion, but the last statement that was made, it sounded like y'all wanted to approve it. So we just want to follow the procedure, correct?
That's what I would like to do.
And we agree that there is a name that can be presented, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And we don't have any disagreement with that name, correct? Okay. So it sounds like we want to go forward with it.
we need to make a motion on that name or not?
I don't think we do. I think that would be an issue if we had more names, but I don't believe we do.
I don't think we're gonna do.
All right. Clear as mud?
But I would like to recommend that Mr. Miller serve on that committee from that area for the board.
When the time comes, I think you know a lot of people out there too. So, I don't know the members of the board, so that time. Will. Doc, I think you gave some correct.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Mr. McDaniel.
That's right.
Dr. Green's, that, do we have any updates as far as, have we gotten any updates as far as the contracts for, of any sort that the board would have signed or somebody signed as far as, this year? Like, when we gave the property to Ridgeway, things like that, wouldn't that come back to the board, because it's not signed by somebody, right? And presented us, so this is being done now, or what the status of those are?
Yeah, so I mean, particularly with Ridgeway, so the board voted to donate the acre of land to the town of Ridgeway for the water tower. And so lots of documents have been signed as we facilitated that transfer. And so no, that's not something I bring back to the board. Once the board gave me approval to move forward with that, then we just implemented what needed to be done for that to occur.
Okay, so has that happened, is that completed?
So that's still in process, Ms. Hartman. So in terms of the transfer has occurred to my knowledge. I think all the legal ease has been completed, and now they're in the process of putting together plans to start constructing the water tower.
Okay. I guess the other one is, what's the status as far as the teacher village?
We are still in very intense conversations with a funder and a builder, and so that project is certainly moving forward. When there are some further updates, when we can get things finalized, I will bring that back to the board.
All right. I believe that's everything under superintendent's report, man?
Yes, sir.
All right, thanks, sir. Curriculum and instruction?
Good evening. For your approval is the first reading of the 2018-19 academic calendar. A copy of the draft calendar along with the State Board Rules, South Carolina Law, Section 559-1-425 have been included in board docs for your review. Just to give you an idea of what has been included in the calendar, the first day For teachers, it's August 13th. The first day of school for students is August 20th. Based on the South Carolina laws, we have included 3 makeup days to include our 3 inclement weather days, which are November 19th, February 18th, and May 27th. In addition, the last day for students will be June the 7th, and then graduation will take place on June the 8th.
Thank you, ma'am. At this time, Chair, entertain a motion regarding the 2018-19 school calendar.
Who's graduation again? Oh, you need a motion.
June 8th.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion we accept the superintendent recommendation for the approval of the first reading of the 2018-2019 academic calendar year.
It's been motioned and seconded. Motion by Ms. Harrison, seconded by Ms. McDaniel to approve the 2018-19 calendar. Any further discussion on that?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I just have a question, and I guess one of the teachers, as well as one of the principals, asked me about this. I know, next week is we're out for. Maybe somebody give me an explanation. Okay, next week we're out on Thursday. This week, okay, but we come back on Friday. When I'm looking here for next year, we are doing the same thing. I guess the students be out that Thursday, and I'm thinking from 11 to 7, right? So I guess the question is, why did we do that rather than do it on a Friday? That and then if you can tell me that.
Are you speaking specifically, Mr. Miller, of the calendar for this current year?
I'm speaking for this year and next year, because I think next year
I think what you're looking at is April 4th next year. Is that correct? Looks like it's a planning day on the Thursday.
Yeah, it's on a Thursday again. Why not just make, do Thursday, and then, Friday, the kids they're out, and the parents can come in and meet with them. That was just brought to me.
Well, that concern was in fact shared, and one of the reasons why it is, the parent conferences do take place on the Thursday, because we felt if we put it on a Friday, we wouldn't have as much participation from parents on a Friday. So we felt if we put it in the middle of the week, like on a Thursday, for example, then we would have better participation. And we did include it on a Wednesday, because we recognize in the community, oftentimes that's church night for Bible study. So we didn't want to include it on a Wednesday night. And then typically on Tuesdays, there's sports and other things that take place. So we felt like with it being on Thursday, that was pretty much a neutral day in the community. And wouldn't conflict with any other school performances and things of that nature.
So what's the concern, Mr. Chair? What's the concern again?
This Thursday, because of parent-teacher conferences, the students are not coming to school. It's a day off. And what Mr. Miller is talking about is it's in the calendar for next year in April. If you look there, it's April 4th. We're doing the same thing. We're having the parent-teacher conferences on a Thursday, and the children are not going to school that day.
And then the students come back on Friday?
Right.
And so, Mr. Miller, I'd say 2 points. To piggyback on what Dr. Avery said, when you plan parent conferences on a Friday afternoon, many times parents are ready for the weekend, worked all week, and very often aren't very excited about going into school for conferences on Friday afternoon. In addition to that, many teachers are not excited about staying at 7 o'clock on a Friday afternoon for parent conference. Well, what you said is valid. Obviously, I'm making some predictions about how people will respond. I could be wrong, but that is some of the thinking that goes into making a decision to do a conference on a Thursday versus a Friday. But I had a principal to talk to me about that as well, and said, her recommendation would be Friday, instead of Thursday. But those are the two primary things that we consider, whether parents are going to be, excited about coming in for conference on Friday, and rather teachers are going to be excited about staying on Friday to 7 o'clock for conference.
But is it possible it could be a late start day? And that way the students can come and do a half day on Thursday, and then the teachers still stay late and have the teacher-parents conference, and then still off on Friday? I think the concern is more the students. Is it not Ms. Miller off on Thursday and then coming on Friday? So that would be such an inconvenience for parents.
Okay, you kind of lost me there, Ms. Manning. So say what you said.
As it is now, there's no school for students on Thursday, right?
Yes.
So if it was a late, because parents not gonna start coming to what, 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon anyway, right?
Well, it depends. It depends on when they work. I mean, obviously, they are, we've asked teachers to be there available, I think, from 11 to 7. Yeah, from 11 to 7, so we can accommodate parents who may work the first shift job. I mean, yeah, so we're trying to accommodate as many parents as we can. So some parents will come early, but obviously lots of parents will get off late, which is 4:30, 5 o'clock.
So what time is half day for students?
Generally, the half day ends up by noon.
By noon?
Yes.
So is it possible we can adjust the time and let it be a late start day for students, so they can get half day in on Thursday, and that way the district doesn't doesn't have to make the day up. And we change the time that we start the parent-teacher conferences, so then Friday is still free for everybody.
So are you suggesting that we not do parent conferences from 11 to 7?
And maybe do it from 12 to 7, or 1 to 7. Yeah. I mean, just consider it. I mean, I'm just doing something out to kind of help the situation.
Can I ask a question on it? Have we done it like this before? Is this year, is Thursday gonna be the first time that we've done this? Do we know?
The 11 to 7, this is the first time we've done
The
that.
day, no reporting, and then the 11 to 7, is this the first time we've done it this particular way?
This year was the first year.
Okay,
This year was the first year.
Okay.
If my memory is correct.
okay. We have to have an additional reading on this, correct?
Correct.
So here's what I propose. Let's see how it goes Thursday, because that's gonna happen. And then next month, you can tell us how it went. And if it went well, then maybe we could, at least we'll have more information to know what to go on.
Now, how are we gonna determine whether or not it went well?
I don't know.
I'm just asking.
Idea to start with, I don't know. We'll flesh the idea out. I mean, surely Dr. Avery can tell us whether there was a better participation rate this go around than there has been in the past. At least we would have that kind of information. That's just my proposal out there.
So we also look at late start as an option.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, if the participation rate is no better doing it this way, then it doesn't seem to make sense to do it that way again, and perhaps your proposal is the way we should go. Well, I'm just saying we just don't have the information to make that decision right now.
And Chairman, if I could add that, we have provided opportunities for staff members across the board to review the calendars and make suggestions. We've had the teacher forum, who are basically our teachers of the year, to be involved in this process. So there have been many people who have contributed to what the calendar looks like. And so as respectful as I am to the person who brought that to my attention, obviously there are lots of people who feel as if this is preferable. So I just, sometimes I think we tend to forget that. I just want to make sure that we are aware that lots of people have contributed to the calendar prior to getting to this stage, who felt as if this would be a good arrangement. So just with that said, just for your information.
The parents get an opportunity to make comments on the calendar?
It was online. I saw it online because that's where I first saw the calendar, so I can tell you yes. And there was a feedback.
Parents do not have access to online.
Well,
Our students take the computer home, so I mean, I understand what you're talking about, but I mean, it was available.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I like to say that, let's see how it works out. And then we can come back, to the drawing board on, Dr. Avery, this your thing. I would just we just wanna make things better for our students and our parents. And so, if it's a better solution, that's what we're gonna do, you know, and our teachers of course. Thank you.
I agree 100%. We just need to have a fair methodology for measuring and monitoring and not just looking and see, because we have good participation. Of course, the parents gonna make the sacrifice. But if it's a easier way to do it for the parents and the teachers and the students, but then you gotta have some kind of way of making that determination. Either a survey for them to fill out when they come in, or a conversation with them, giving them the alternatives. Because if you don't know the alternative, how do you know? You can't, if you're not comparing it to anything.
Ms. Harper?
Well, we have the conferences now, are they using a certain day of the week now?
I mean, they're doing Thursday this week, so, yes. It's happening this Thursday.
I'm saying in the past, when we had, you know, the teacher conference,
So your question, are they always on the same day?
day of the week.
No, I don't think so. I mean, of course, we've had,
They just
yeah, I think they vary.
jump around. Thank you.
All right. Any further comments, questions, concerns regarding the calendar? This is first reading now, We've had a motion, second, and thorough discussion. All those in favor of approving the calendar for first reading indicate by raising your right hand. 7-0, thank you. Continuing on curriculum and instruction.
All right, the second item for your approval is the approval of the locally designed elective courses for local board approval. And as you all may be aware, the Board of Trustees is required to approve the local design elective courses based on the state reg that is included for your review in board docs. But this is an annual request, and these are the courses that are outlined for you. Many of the courses, for example, from Fairfield Central High School, are the preparatory courses, the seminal courses to help students prepare for the EOC EOC exam or test. Also listed are courses for the middle school, and we also have courses listed for Gordon Odyssey Academy, along with the win time, which is whatever I need time that are listed here, along with the appropriate course code.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there a motion to approve locally designed elective courses for local approval for Fairfield Central High School, Middle School, and Gordon Odyssey Academy?
Mr. Chair, I make a recommendation, a motion that we accept the superintendent's recommendation that the board approve the locally designed elective courses for the 2018-2019 school year.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir. It's all right. Thank you, Pastor Jackson. All right, it's been motioned by Ms. Harrison, second by Pastor Jackson, to approve the local design elective courses. Is there any discussion at this time?
I have one question, Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, are all these like required to help them, or these like elected, right?
Yes, yes.
Why don't we have any African American culture or history courses? We already have one?
Yeah, so Ms. McDaniel, these are just locally designed courses. I mean, obviously, there are many courses, like an African American Studies course that is already in the State Department list of courses. So
Right,
these
do we have one at high school?
are we teaching that this? I can't recall. I have to touch base.
That just seems to be one of the conversations that is constantly being brought up at the School Board Association caucus meetings, about teaching students about African American history other than just in February. So I just figured since we're doing these elective courses, that would be a good opportunity to incorporate such a course.
Yeah, so what I'm saying, Ms. McDaniel, is that there are multiple African American history courses that have already been approved. We don't need to do a specific locally designed course. You know what I'm saying? In terms of rather we're teaching an African American history course, I need to verify that. But that's not a locally designed course. It's kind of like English 1, Alpha 1, or U.S. history, or economics. These are courses that have already been established at the State Department.
Okay, can you check that, and if we're not,
Yeah.
see if there's any opportunity we can teach them? Thank you.
Any further questions, issues, concerns on this? If not, it's been motion and second. All those in favor of approving the local design electric courses, indicate by raising your right hand. I believe that's 7-0. Thank you. Operations and finance.
Good evening. The first item in the board packet is the finance report for board review for the month of March 2018.
Any questions, Mr. Robinson, on the financial report for the month? Seeing none, go ahead.
Item number 2, we have a facility usage request, and the superintendent is recommending the board approve the 3 facility usage requests with waiver of fees for Salcahatchee Summer Service, Fairfield Central, July 14th through July 21st, Gethsemane Church and Sunday School Union for McCrory-Liston, June 24th through the 29th, and the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission at McCrory-Liston for April the 25th.
All right. Chair will entertain a motion to deal with all 3 of those at the same time or separately, whatever the board's pleasure is.
Mr. Chair.
You know, take a sip.
We want 2 of them in there. The nuclear one.
Whatever your motion is, we'll.
So we doing 2 and 1?
Yeah, do the business.
Why don't you make a motion, Ms. McDaniel?
Make a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation on facility usage for Gethsemane Church and Sunday School and for Salcahatchee Summer Service.
All right. Is there a second on that motion? Mr. Davis, thank you. All right, it's been motioned by Ms. McDaniel, seconded by Mr. Davis to approve the facility usage for Gethsemane Church and Salcahatchee. It's just fun to say Gethsemane and Salcahatchee. Anyway. Any discussion on those 2? No further discussion. I'm really not staring at it. I keep looking down, man. I'm sorry. Look over there. All right.
Red, right?
That's what it is. All right. So if there's no further discussion, been motion and second, all those in favor of approving the facility usage for Gethsemane Church and Salcahatchee, please indicate by raising your right hand. 7-0 on that. All right. Is there a further motion regarding the see, I can say Gethsemane and Salcahatchee. I can't say U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
Can I just ask you a question before I make the motion, because it determines how I would make the motion? That's great.
We can make a motion out of you won't make it there.
They get paid to use that facility, we will never, never ask them for the money.
Pardon me?
Did we ask them to pay to use the facility?
No, we didn't ask them, Ms. McDaniel. They have made a request to use facility every year since I've been here. And I asked for a waiver of fees every year since I've been here.
They said that they would give us the money if we would ask them to give it to us. But anyway, I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation regarding the facility usage request for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Use of which school? Corey-Liston.
All right. Been motion by Ms. McDaniel. Is there a second? I believe she voted for the recommendation, correct? I mean, your motion was in regard to the recommendation. Doesn't indicate how you're going to vote. You're just making a motion.
Correct.
Okay. So your motion is to accept the recommendation. Did I get a second? I'm sorry. Okay, Ms. Hartman, we'll get a second on that. Any further discussion? Ms. McDaniel? I'll let you say it now. Okay, all right. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of approving the facility usage for the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission with fee waiver, indicate by raising your right hand. I believe that is 6-0. Negative, I'm sorry. We're doing so good on 7-0s, I just got tied up, I'm sorry. Ms. McDaniel? I'm asking for your vote. You're voting in the negative, correct? Okay, thank you, ma'am. It's 6 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative. Yes, ma'am, please.
Madam Secretary, if you would let the record reflect that I voted against that because the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has funding that they can give to the school district for use of that facility.
Amen. Next on the agenda.
The third item on the agenda, and this is for information purposes, just to let the board know that we plan on moving forward with an employee self-service. And what this is, it allows our employees to make their own W4 changes for withholdings, set up their own direct deposits, and change any of their demographic information like address changes, phone number changes. They can do all of that electronically. Right now, all of that is paper-based, takes a lot of time, and we've often found that sometimes employees are away and need to make changes, so this will help them to make those changes. Also, some of the other benefits are by having the ability to distribute pay stubs electronically instead of by paper. We save a lot of money on paper, courier cost, and also especially during the summer months when we're mailing out stubs because most of the teachers, a lot of other classified employees aren't here, we would also save on postage cost. This would also give employees the ability to, oftentimes people want old copies of their W-2s. We've had situations in which employees have moved away and are missing a W-2 and they're trying to contact us to get a copy of that and we have to mail it out. So this really makes things much more efficient for district staff and makes it more convenient for all of our employees. And we have talked to all of the principals about this, and if there's anyone who does not have internet access or access electronically, we've set up a system where we will have a separate location where an employee can go to a computer, log in. If they want to print out a statement, they can do that. And also, they'll also have access via a smartphone. So even if they have a smartphone and don't have a computer, they would still have access to view their pay information.
Any questions, issues, concerns on that? It's not an action item, so if anybody's got any issues. Seeing none. Next item.
The final item is the first reading of the fiscal year 18-19 budget. And I guess typically, unless the board wants to do otherwise, I'll just go through a brief presentation and then at the end have the motion for approval for the first reading.
That'll be fine, yes,
Sure.
sir.
Okay. If Ms. Brown could pull up that presentation. Thank you, Ms. Brown. Just briefly, and I know we do this every year, but I think it is a good point to kind of review some of the categories of revenue that we do have in the general fund. And generally, our general fund revenue is made out of different categories of revenue. The first one, we have local revenues, and this is very significant, which comes from property taxes from Fairfield County. Now, it's important to note that the revenue generated through these taxes are on non-owner occupied residences and other properties. So this is not if you are residing in a home and it's your primary residence, we are not, there's no tax revenue that comes from that particular property. So this is all businesses and, like I said, second homes and other properties that are in the county. We also have revenue from state reimbursements of property taxes. In the past, there's been legislation that has been passed in which property tax, certain categories of taxes are limited, and we actually get reimbursements from the state. The most significant one and the most recent one was through Act 388. If I'm sure most of you remember, at one point in time on your primary residence, there were taxes that were generated to go for operations for the school districts. But now, instead of homeowners paying taxes for operations, now that revenue is instead, it actually comes from the state and then is sent to the school district. So we have reimbursements for that. And then our next significant category of revenue in the general fund is the Educational Finance Act. And basically that's where the state gives each school district per pupil funding. And that funding is based on weighted pupil units and several other factors in terms of the classification of students that we do have. Important to note that the state, when you hear about a base student cost, the state does not fund the entire base student cost. They fund a portion of that, and then a district is required to fund a portion of that. And I'll go through the amounts for each one of these categories in a minute. We also have funds in our general fund through the Education Improvement Act. Generally, these are funds that deal with reimbursing districts for the cost of salaries and benefits of some of our employees. And then the final category that we have transfers to our general fund that actually come from other funds. So the summary here is just a summary of our revenue proposed, in which we compare the revenue that was in the budget that was approved for 17-18 on the left-hand side versus the revenue that we are proposing for fiscal year 18-19. In total, last year we had $38.7 million as our budgeted revenue. For the 18-19 year, we're proposing $41.2 million, and that's roughly a $2.5 million difference. And the primary reason for that, if you look at the next line item under total allocated, where we have total revenues and reimbursements, that deals with the local revenues that we have. The biggest reason for that increase is due to the non-residential property tax revenue. Last year we had $25.2 million budgeted, and for next year we're projecting $27.2 million. Now this is not due to an increase in the millage, but rather due to a projected increase on the property tax base. And for conservative purposes, that estimate is actually based on what we expect to receive this year. So I'm not increasing it any more than what we're going to receive this year. So the increase of $2 million in non-residential property taxes really makes up a major portion of the total budget increase in our general fund. As I mentioned, we're proposing the same millage, 203.1 mills. It's important to note that the last time we did increase the millage was in fiscal year 2010, and there have been, at last count, I know at least 59 school districts that have increased their millage since we had our last millage increase. We also have the state residential reimbursements projected for next year at $3 million, and that's the reimbursements we get from the state on the formerly taxed homeowner properties. And we're also projecting that we'll get another $2 million in other state residential reimbursements and about approximately $200,000 in other local taxes. The next category, the Education Finance Act. Last year, or I guess I should say in 17-18, the budget was for $4.3 million. This year, we're looking at approximately $4.15 million for next year, and that's based on the projections so far in the legislature. And then for the state salary and fringe reimbursements that we get from EIA that's actually in our general fund, we're looking at a small increase of about $200,000, which is, again, based on the legislative action that's available thus far. And finally, we also have the category line item for other transfers. from other funds that will be in our general fund, and we're predicting that that will increase approximately $200,000 in total. And this is really just a summary of what I've just told you, which is no millage increase, and that we're estimating that the current millage for next year, the current property tax base will generate property tax revenue of approximately $27.2 million. And really that's the most significant piece of our revenue projections for next year. And that does account for approximately $2 million of the $2.5 billion increase that we're looking at proposing for the fiscal 18-19 budget. And again, just other notes, we talked about the Education Finance Act revenue, which is based so far on legislative action, and also our employer contributions, also based on the latest information that we have from the legislature. Of course, the budget has not been finalized and probably won't be until sometime in May, maybe the middle of May, hopefully. So right now, we're just going on the best information that they've provided thus far. And now I'll just tell you briefly about some of the categories of general fund expenditures that we have. By far, salaries and benefits, which includes all salaries, the employer portion of retirement, the employer portion of Social Security, and the employer portion of the health insurance that we have to pay, as well as workers' compensation. All of that's under our salaries and benefits. That is the most significant two categories of expenditures that we do have. And of course, with retirement and Social Security, every dollar increase that we have in salaries means those items will actually go up. And for next year's budget, right now it looks as though the district will have to pay at least an additional 4% approximately for health insurance cost for our employees, and the retirement cost, the percentage that we have to pay is going up by 1% as well. Now, in terms of salaries, right now we're proposing salary increases for 18-19, which will include a step increase for all of our employees. As you're all aware, teachers and non-teaching employees are all on a salary scale. Typically every year they move up one step on that scale, and we're also proposing a 2% cost of living increase for teachers and all other employees. And so those are the items that will result in salary increases in the budget for next year. The other categories that we have of expenditures are purchase services. Typically, we have property insurance, professional services, and some water and sewer, travel, things of that nature. Generally, any type of service-oriented item is included under purchase services. Then we have supplies and materials, which generally are tangible goods, school supplies. For some reason, electricity is included under there, things of that nature. And then capital outlay, which is any major equipment item that costs over $5,000. And the final two categories of expenditures that we have the other objects. Usually those are dues and fees, or people activity related expenditures that are in the general fund. And then finally transfers, which the most significant transfer item that we would have in our budget would be the transfer that we are making to Chester School District for the Medford students. This current year is approximately 620,000. I can't remember the exact amount. I could look it up for this year, and I projected a small increase in that amount for next year, and generally that amount's based on the number of students, but also it's based on the local revenue that Chester actually generates during the school year. So it's a little tough to predict sometimes, but it was about 600,000 for this current year. This chart just shows the changes in the budget from 17-18 to what we're projecting for next year based on those different categories. First of all, and most significantly again, salaries and benefits. That's going to be an increase of approximately $1.7 million. Again, the salaries are going to increase approximately $700,000. As I mentioned, that's due to the step increase for all employees, as well as the 2% cost of living increase for all employees. We're going to have retirement cost increase included in that number of about $600,000 roughly. Of course, when salaries go up, that means retirement costs will go up, the portion that the district pays, and also because there is a 1% increase in the amount that we have to pay as an employer, that contributes to that $600,000 retirement cost increase. And then finally, the other significant piece is related to the health insurance cost that the districts has to pay for employees, and that's going to be approximately $250,000. So those are the three major items of salary and benefit increases that make up that $1.7 million difference between this year and next year's projected budget. Next, in purchase services, we're projecting an increase of about $635,000. The most significant part of that is in other professional services. We've budgeted approximately $325,000 of that for SROs for schools for next year. So that's about half of that total increase just in SRO cost for an expansion of that program. And we're also looking at an increase of about $180,000 approximately under purchase services for the services that we use for substitute teachers. As many of you are aware, a few years ago, we went with an outsourced service for our subs, and the number for subs really is going to vary from year to year depending on how many employees we have with long-term illnesses. If we have just a rash of teachers who are pregnant, of course we're still paying them if they have sick days, but that means we also then have to bring in subs. So that number kind of varies, and that number is increased really based on kind of the actual cost that we've had over the past year. And so those are really the two most significant items under our purchase services and why that number is going up $600,000. And then the next item on the supplies and materials, that increased $38,000. The primary reason is for our electricity cost. That's going to go up approximately $50,000 we're projecting. We've added a wing on to the middle school, and now we're also talking about a field house, and so just due to the increase in utility costs in general and due to some additional square footage, we're projecting there will be an increase there, but that increase is offset by some other reductions in other areas, so that's why the total increase is only $38,000 for supplies and materials. And then the most significant other items that we have our other objects, which, as I said before, that's for dues and fees and some pupil activity items, and then transfers. And the transfers is primarily the amount for Chester County, that amount that we're making. I'm projecting that next year will be about $626,000 for next year's budget. And really, this is just a reiteration of some of the things that I just told you, just in writing, for the record, some of the details of some of the things I just mentioned. And just finally, the budget is balanced. The revenues equal the expenditures, $41,267,157. There is no millage increase request in the requested budget. So therefore, the district's requesting first reading approval of a budget of $41,267,157, which includes the millage, which is the same current millage we have this year of 203.1 mills.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. This time, Chair, entertain a motion regarding, so we can get to discussion on the budget, and a motion approving the budget for the 18-19 school year.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion, we accept the superintendent recommendation, the board approve for the first reading of the 2018-19 budget in the amount of 41.2 mil. Rather than get a second.
Second.
Thank you, ma'am. It's been motion by Ms. Harrison, second by Mr. Miller to approve first reading of FY 18-19 budget amount of $41,267,157. Discussion.
I heard, Mr. Chair, I heard Mr. Robinson talk about the funding for some additional SRO officers, just funding. I think that's something that was warranted. Some of the parents talk about that. And so you said it was right at half a million?
Well, we've included an increase of $325,000.
Besides the other three that we have?
That's correct.
So that would be, funding is for how many altogether?
Well, we just projected 5, I believe, officers in total.
So, Mr. Robinson, if I could just add to that, a little clarification, Mr. Miller. The way we arrived at the figure of $325,000 is to look at what we were paying individual officers currently, salary and benefits, and we wanted to put enough money in the budget to cover at least 5 additional resource officers. So that's how we came up with the additional figure of $325 to be able to cover the cost of an additional 5 officers.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, sir.
Do we see the state helping out in?
And that's another good question. I mean, many of you have read news reports where the governor has indicated that he wants this to be a priority. I think he requested $5 million to provide additional resource officers to schools. You know, unfortunately, that doesn't begin to scratch the surface. You know, as I reviewed the House and Senate proposals, even though they're going to conference committee, I don't see any revenue that is included to go towards resource officers. So as much as people have talked about that at the state level, once again, any expansion of resource officer programs really have filtered down to the local level. And so for districts that are not able to figure out ways to include that into their local budgets, it doesn't look like the state will be providing it.
Any other questions?
I got another question, but it's on a different subject.
Go ahead. Nobody else is stepping forward right now. Looks like they're all formally.
I'm talking enough tonight, okay?
Doing all right.
I'm the sheriff. I had some conversation with some folk. I'm talking about band now, okay? And I asked that we look at supplements on band. And I'm talking about our high school band board, and that the supplements, and I looked at it was only, besides the band director, it was only $10,000. Okay, and my point is this, is that I know a lot goes into that. They start up, the band starts up in July, just like the football team. But they don't stop in November. And they stop in May, you know, when school is out. They're doing band camp, you know, and they're doing, they're playing on Friday night, and they're in a parade Saturday. I'm saying, where y'all get all this energy from? You know, but they have assistant band directors, and so some of them, they look out and left us. I'm just gonna be, you know, say, I can't do this. I can't work for 2 pennies out, so to speak. You know, and so I asked that, it ain't much, but it's something that we look into, putting $10,000 in the band's stipend for his assistant coaching. I mean, it's good. I ain't gonna call it assistant coach, but assistant band directors. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we know what the current supplements are already?
I just want to do it, yeah. And so, Mr. McDaniel, I think the entire supplement for van is $20,000. There's a $10,000 supplement to the director, and then there's $10,000 that is divided among the assistants that he identifies. And so, Mr. Miller, if I'm understanding correctly, he's asking that be increased $10,000, not for the director, but an additional $10,000 to be divided among the assistants.
And one of the reasons I asked is, I don't know if I brought this, I think this has been an issue, a concern before, supplements that we're paying. I understand they do a whole lot of work, but there's a whole lot of things other than money that comes from coaching and band directing and all those different avenues. But if we're gonna look at the supplements for extracurricular activities, then I would like to see us look at that and compare it to what we're paying our cafeteria workers. I understand they're part-time, but they work 180 days out of the year. And some of their pay is not much more than some of the pay that we're providing to, as supplements. So I would just like to say, we look at both to see what the fairness is, or the equity is in what we pay our cafeteria workers. And I'm not sure about custodian, might be look at those as well. I mean, I understand it's a lot of work when they go to the games and all that, but there's also a lot of other rewards that come from those positions. And our cafeteria workers have to be there for the little bit of money that we pay them, making sure that our students have great meals every single day, and 2, 3, sometimes 3 meals a day, depending on extracurricular activities.
And so, if I can speak to that, Ms. McDaniel, as you recall, probably 2 or 3 years ago, I presented a revised salary schedule to the board that made some modifications to some of our established salaries. I recognize that there are some adjustments that we need to make, not only to the cafeteria salary schedule, but to multiple categories of employees. That's something that's forthcoming. I mean, I'm still working, me and Mr. Robinson, to pull some things together to eventually bring back another modification, and I'm sure I'll get your support once I get there. But part of the reason, Ms. McDaniel, even though the state, the House passed a proposal where they were going to increase teacher salaries by 2%, even though they didn't fully fund it, they said increase it by 2% but not fully funding it. The state increased teacher salary by 1%, but they were going to fully fund it. There was nothing in the equation about classified employees. And so there was no discussion about cafeteria workers, bus drivers, or anyone as it relates to that increase. As you know, what Kevin presented is, we're proposing to do a 2% across the board increase for all employees. All right, and so since we recognize that even though the state does not necessarily, probably won't mandate a 2, they definitely won't mandate anything for classified employees. In addition to the step, we are proposing to move forward with an additional 2% increase for classified staff as well. So I agree with what you said, and that has influenced our decisions to make our salary increases effective for all employees to include classified employees.
But I still ask that we look at still comparing and looking at the equity on, because when you talk about 2% on $20,000 versus 2% on $110,000, that's a big difference. And it doesn't necessarily have to be paid, because if you give them a pay, then you have to end up giving them more, the benefits, increase the retirement and FICA and whatever else. I'm not sure about how the state now classified the kind of money that you can give and not have to pay the retirement on it. But I just ask that we look at something, because when you have your cafeteria workers who, and actually, like you said, are classified. And it's just like going in the bank and the cashiers, the lowest paid person, but yet all this money crossing their hands. And I understand what Mr. Miller was saying, but it just kind of sort of struck a nerve when we continue to increase supplements that we're giving, whereby we have people who work in the full year not making much more than the supplements that we're giving. It's just a cause for concern. I ask y'all to look at that and see if you can maybe address that in its needed.
Let me clarify, because I don't want nobody, I am for the cafeteria workers, custodians, and what have you. But I'm not talking about the football stipends. I'm talking about the band. The band stipend is $2,000. Something $2,000 to work a whole year.
Right, but I'm just saying, look at all of them and see if we can bring them in line sometime where we
But that's $2,000 is nowhere close to $20,000. You know what I'm saying? That was my whole point, was that the music, the band, that's ridiculous. You know, I'm just being real compared to, and I don't want to throw the football but compared to football or any other, the band is.
Right, but the biggest comparison is when you have a full-time, or part-time, basically full-time, if they're making over 30 hours a week, and their pay is the same as what we pay the supplements for people who really enjoy what they're doing, and they get some other joy and recognition out of what they're doing. Our cafeteria workers get nothing, and then they don't work during the summer, and they run and try and get unemployment, and sometimes we stop them from getting unemployment. Bus drivers, that whole category of people. I'm just saying, look at it.
Well, and so, Mr. McDaniel, as I said, we have consistently tried to move forward and improve what we have been paying, all of our employees. And that's just rounded. And so if there's a pleasure for the board to say that you want to move faster than what we are proposing, obviously that's the board's pleasure. But we're just looking at how we can move as fast as we can, as far as we can, under the context of the current budget. But
I get that, but I'm saying if we go look at supplements, whether it's for one supplement or all supplements, before we give another supplement, we need to look at it on the table, decide what we're paying our classified people. And I understand the unfairness that Ms. Miller is saying in that one particular category, but maybe we need to look at some adjustments there. I don't know what they're making. I know what they was making when we used to see it 4 or 5 years ago. And it was a bit sad what we was paying for supplements compared to what we were paying some of the classified people who work 185, 190 days a year. So I'm just asking us to just look at it. And hopefully you'll have a eye that was different from what was seeing it before when nothing was done about it.
Okay, now say that again now.
When you look at supplements,
Okay.
and I hope I didn't hear Mr. Miller say somebody did a $20,000 supplement. But
No, I said something is on the 2,000 compared to maybe if somebody was working in the cafeteria was making 20. Now, my whole point was that they ain't paying the band, so they ain't getting nothing. They working for pennies.
But I know when you have an employee who get a supplement for wrestling, a supplement for soccer, a supplement for this, that, the mama, the daddy, the fleet, then you compare it to what we're paying our cafeteria workers and some of our other classified people. It just doesn't look good. It's just totally unfair. And I'm just asking us to look at it. And you may come back and say, I'm Miss McDaniel, and whatever you call me. I looked at it but I just can't see any room for movement. But I'm just asking,
Well, and so let's be clear, Ms. McDaniel, you know, you are the fiduciary responsible person in this arrangement, right?
Yes, sir, I am.
The board, and so if you wanna give me direction to do whatever it is you wanna do, however it affects the budget, I mean, I can present you with a plan to do whatever it is you wanna do.
I'm asking you to look at it and bring us something back, but that means that those supplements, you would have to bring to us what they're making, and not just per sport, in total.
Well, as it relates to the salary, what I would say, from my perspective, and you can give me further direction, I think looking at our salary schedule in totality is what I need to present to the board. You follow me? So I understand you were saying about cafeteria workers, I'm probably a little uncomfortable looking at it just from that perspective. I need to look at the salary schedule in totality and be able to present something to the board as it relates to the salary schedule across the board. Now, I'm glad to see that you are 100% behind this because, you know, when I bring a salary schedule, it very well could impact some things, even including millage, depending on how far we want to go in terms of improving our salary schedule.
When you bring the salary schedule in detail.
Well, but I'm not, I mean, that's something that's going to take me probably months to put together.
But you would bring what we currently have. And I can show you the kind of inequities that I'm talking about, that I guarantee you I can pick up on just looking at it one time.
Well, so what's the difference, Renee? I'm just trying to understand the direction that you were giving me as
Well, the
superintendent.
first direction was just to look at just the comparison of supplements to what we're paying classified people. Period. Just look at supplements in general to what we're paying classified people, while in addition, you're looking at the supplements that we're paying to see whether or not it's this little request, because I'm not trying to take away from what he requested. But we're paying the different supplements we're paying along for the different people who are receiving them. So you can see what the band director's making, you can see what the assistant band director's making, you can see what the athletic director's making, you can see what the soccer coach is making. Because we used to get the whole list of supplements, so we could see what everybody was making.
Yeah, you get it every year.
Well, I ain't seen it broken down by sport.
Yeah,
Like I said again. So I'm asking that you bring us that broken down by sport.
And as I said, Mr. Lynn, we do that every year, broken down by sport, every summer.
Okay, and then the salaries that the classified people make.
And we have that information too, that's in the salary schedule.
One salary schedule, annual salary. Unless the annual salary is in the salary schedule, but usually your classified people is by the hour.
And so once again, I mean, I still don't quite understand the direction that, if the board was giving me some direction, I don't really quite understand what that is. But I'll let Ms. Hartman ask you a question and then maybe we can circle around to that as we.
No, I want to make sure we clear when you leave. Unless there's an objection from the board, because I already know the board and not just Andy has some information. I'm asking if we can have a comparison of the supplements that we're paying to what our classified people are making.
How are you supposed to make that comparison, Ms. McDaniel? I think that's part of the problem. I mean,
There's got to be a list somewhere, because we pay them from somewhere.
I understand,
There
but,
should be a list of what each.
what it sounds like to me, you're asking to have a person who has a schedule of this is what I'm paid per hour or on a salary compared to someone who gets a supplement, which there's no scale on.
You have an annual salary of what your cafeteria workers make, not by name, just by position.
Right.
What the annual salary is for that position versus the annual salary for your supplemental people who get supplemental pay. Not the teaching pay, but just the supplemental pay.
Right.
Because if you are the dance coordinator, teacher, whatever we call them, that gets a supplement, there's an amount for that position.
Right.
I'm just asking the amount for that position compared to what we're paying the classified people. No names, just positions.
Yeah, I guess, Mr. McDaniel, my point is, I can provide you all the supplements, I can provide you the salary schedule.
That's
So
fine.
you have the salary schedule and you have the supplement. Now, past that, I'm not following what your directions are in terms of comparing them. Yeah, so you see, here are the supplements that we're paying. We're paying wrestling, we're paying assistant percussion on the band, I mean, we have all the supplements we're paying, and we have the salary schedule. I can provide that, I'm assuming that's what you're asking for?
If you could provide that, then that would start the discussion. Unless there's an objection, then
Mr.
All right. I think we're on the same page there, Ms. Harper.
I think in line with, Ms. McDaniel, my opinion is raises a lot of times, which is I think what she was saying, you go by percentages most of the time. Well, the ones that are way up here in salaries versus the ones way down here, the one that gets more is the one that's way up here, right?
Yeah.
So my opinion is, I think we need to go more in line with maybe more across the board sometime, you know, straight amounts, not percentages. That's more fair to me, because, you know, like I said, the ones that's up here, and then the poor people, just like she's saying, the people that's working in the cafeterias, cleaning up, they don't get much, because it's going by percentage, because they don't make as much, right?
So Ms. Harper, let's kind of expand on that a little bit. So, just as I discussed what they're doing in the House and the Senate, where they're looking at a 1% increase for teachers or potentially a 2% increase for teachers. Well, the same thing would hold true. I mean, there are some first-year teachers who may be making $34,000 a year, and there are some 15-year teachers who may be making $49,000 a year. And so, to suggest that we would not use a percentage, but a specific number, doesn't seem to be realistic in my opinion.
Well, I think again, maybe look at, teachers might be different than another category. We might be looking at maybe more of the people that are, like I said, that clean up, that do the cafeteria. Just different ones, not necessarily maybe on a percentage base. Anyway, just possibly look at that to consider it.
Thank
Is a lot.
you.
So, thank you.
Do you have anything further? I'm not trying to cut you off, I'm sorry.
No, that's it. Thank
Okay.
you.
Anybody else have anything?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I agree with them, you know, the cafeteria works and all the custodians getting, raises, you know, Dr. Green, I'm sure will look into it. But last year when they did the stipend, they did have a list, a supplement, list of everybody that was getting it. Several people got, raises, and, the head basketball boys and girls coach varsity, stayed the same, and I wanted, you know, to look into giving them at least $10,000 across the board, you know, because it is a revenue sport too, and they actually start conditioning, doing the summer and doing all this. So right now they're getting $8,500 because it was broken down, but several of them got a raise last year and some of them didn't. So I just wanted to see if you would look into that.
Okay, and so just to provide clarification to what Ms. Harrison is recommending is that we move varsity boys and varsity girls from $8,500 supplement to $10,000 supplement for varsity girls and varsity boys.
Any other questions on that at this time? Just a couple for me. First of all, I do want to clarify the 2% that employees are getting are all our employees?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, again, to clarify, the state is the legislature is talking about either 1 or 2%, but they are talking about teachers only, correct?
Yes.
What we are talking about is doing 2% regardless of what the legislature does. And there's a possibility that they may give us some funding, but that's in conference committee right now. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Okay. So we could get some help on that, but we may not get help on that. But as we have it budgeted right now, we can do 2% for all our employees, not increasing any millage, correct?
Correct.
So the other increase, and that's the vast majority of the increase in our budget for this year, correct? Is these salary increases we're talking about, plus benefits?
Yes.
All right. Then the next increase we're looking at is to increase the number of SROs we have protecting our children, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So,
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, on the SRO, who will pay for the vehicles? Will we pay for those, or do the town pay for them?
Yeah, so Mr. McDaniel, the arrangement that we have with the sheriff's department for the contract is we cover salary, and benefits. The sheriff department covers the automobile, the equipment, the training and the like, okay? Obviously, our requirement is perpetual, okay, whereas, their investment, is not. And so, but they are required to purchase the bill.
Anything further at time? Remember, this is first reading. We do get to hash this over a little bit more.
How long are we gonna be paying just?
Until the law changes, I suppose, or unless they consolidate schools. I think we may, I'm not gonna, I mean, it would be in my personal opinion that if stuff changed in Chester, we might be able to have a different argument, but
I
it
mean,
would look to me that Supreme Court ruling is final until something else changes.
but do they have in the order that it goes on indefinite forever?
I believe that's exactly what the order says, yes.
Do they
Unless
get a
the law
copy of
changes.
it? Do we get a copy of it?
Supreme Court website.
Excuse me?
Do they tell us how many students per, like what grade they're in?
I think it's his. Ma'am, what would you?
Do they tell us how many students by grade that are in their schools that we're paying for?
It's, Ms. Hartman, I don't remember off the top of my head whether it's broken down by grade or not, but they do provide documentation as it relates to how many students we have to reimburse them for. I need to check whether they do it by grade. I'm not 100% sure.
Could you check that for me, please? I appreciate it.
It's not,
Thank you.
it's not.
It's not by grade.
I guess my concern is,
Thank you.
there was an increase from $500 and some thousand to $600 and some thousand. The base student cost increased how much?
Maybe $60, but we'll have to wait and see what comes out of conference committee. You know, that's best case scenario is $60.
And it's still 150 students? Something like that? Did you say last year it was like 150 students?
I don't remember off the top of my head how many there were last year, but it's important to note that it's not as simple as how many students there are. So theoretically, the number of students can stay the same, but if the contributions in Chester are greater, then the amount goes up.
Right.
So it's based on the local tax contribution in Chester that determines the amount. So, yeah, so it depends.
But Chester has received additional industry since all this occurred.
Exactly.
Are we looking at from year to year? I mean, I think it's money well spent to have the attorney revisit that and look at it. There is no way I can believe, and it could be, but I do not believe that they intended for that to go on and on and on forever. And there's no reconciliation process in place, there's nothing.
The statute says that's what we have to do, and that's what the case interpreted was the statute. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I don't, there's no end date on that thing. So until something changes on the legislation, that ruling, in my personal opinion, is what's gonna keep going.
But even if it doesn't have an end date, there may be something else within the order that will cause us to go back to court and request the end date.
Oh, I agree. I think if something changes with the way their schools are in Chester, we would have an argument.
They've gotten some pretty good industry up in here recently.
That means they're gonna spend more money on their students, which costs us more money.
No, it
That's
does not.
exactly what that
They get
means.
more money coming in on the tax revenue side.
Wow.
Yeah, it increases.
Yeah, so Mr. Daniel, what Mr. Daniel said is exactly right. So when their local contribution increases, that means the amount we have to pay them per student increases.
I need to understand am I hearing there's a resistance to revisit this, just to look at it and make sure?
Yeah, I'll let.
I mean, I have a vested interest in not touching it, leave it alone, but we need to look at that. That's a lot of money that we sending over there. We funding a whole school, how much is the budget we give for Canada?
I could tell you.
All the elementary schools are somewhere around $1 million in my recollection.
Basically, we have that same amount of students in our schools here per grade, correct? Close to it.
I don't follow the question, Ms. Hart.
You said we had approximately, we're paying for 150 students.
I don't quite remember
recall it, I think that's what you said last year, but anyway, I know it can change every year. So my thinking is, okay, we have approximately, I know from graduation, the same amount per year that's graduating, so I'm thinking that each grade maybe is approximately the same. Am I correct that these students are basically coming from the Midford area,
Correct?
the lake area?
No, Midford area.
So the ones at the lake, how do you determine which one school they go to, Manchester or Fairfield?
I mean, we don't have any influence over that decision, Ms. Hartman. The ruling
Some
said
could be from the
that.
lake. Some could be from the lake.
No, the students that we require to reimburse them for are students from Midford. And so in addition to submitting names, they have to submit addresses. Now, you know, one could suggest that they are less than honest in terms of the names and addresses, but the names that you have to submit have to correspond with addresses in the Midford area. So if you had a name and an address that was on your street, Ms. Hartman, then obviously that would not qualify for reimbursement.
Okay, the reason I'm bringing this up, and I don't know, is something to, again, the board to look at. My thought, different people have commented to me on it, is what's the possibility when you're talking about these kind of figures, if it's not going to change, is to put schools between Ridgeway and Midford and find out whether these students might be interested in coming to our schools if we put one there, closer to them.
Short answer is gonna cost a whole lot more than $600,000 a year to do that, but.
Well, another thought is, like I said, if they have, and that's why I asked what the grades they had there, and how many students per grade. If you put an elementary school and you put a, maybe combination of a middle school and high school together instead of two for that. Anyway, it's a thought, because, and yeah, it's not gonna pay for it right away, but it's eventually we pay for it. If those parents would be possibly, you know, put out a survey for it. Anyway, something, I'm just throwing that in there.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
what I want to know is this, it's just simple. Where are the checks and balances? That's all I want to know. Where are they? And, you know, we got checks and balances that, you know, but I don't want anybody fudging the math, so to speak, you know, fudging the math and making them paying more. You know, that's what I'm asking, that we can, you know, follow up or whatever we need to do, you know, Ms. Belton, Ms. Bush, or whoever, let's find out, make sure that they're there. You know, check, but I don't, you know, I ain't smart, man, where I'm just trying to figure it out, we're trying to get this thing reduced, you know, so we could, well, I would just love to see all of them come on back home. You know.
Unfortunately, I don't think we're gonna crack that nut tonight.
You're right.
Anything further on this right now? All right.
So, Mr. Chairman, I really would, request that administration come up with a way of being able to verify firmly. And if they can't, then we need to have our attorneys figure out how we can do that. I mean, we've been spending money at that point, 6, 7, how many years now?
Well,
And it's all been.
it's money a lot longer than that, but.
Oh, okay.
It was being done when I was the attendance coordinator. And you know how long will that be?
Like I said, this is not a nut we're gonna be able to crack this evening. I certainly understand what you're saying, Ms. McDaniel, and
Right, we can go ahead and put it right in place and start looking at it. I mean, every year we get to this point and we ask the same question and we get the same.
That's right.
So we can just maybe put something in motion and start just kind of reviewing it and seeing. And then, I mean, maybe when we get a report, we'll see if we good to know that that's it.
yes, ma'am.
We don't have to look for the money for the classified people and the supplemental
motion and a second, and I think we've discussed very thoroughly for this evening. Remember, we'll have another shot at this. So the motion on the floor at this time is approval of first reading of the FY 18-19 budget in the amount of $41,267,157. All those in favor indicate by raising your right hand. That's 7-0. Thank you. I think we're done with you, Mr. Roberts. Human Resources.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For your approval this evening, under Human Resources, item 1 for certified resignations. Superintendent recommends board approval for certified resignations and terminations for current staff members not returning after the conclusion of the 2017-18 academic year, and those items for your approval are exhibited in Exhibit 1A and 1B.
Thank you, ma'am. Chair will entertain a motion regarding certified resignation terminations. I don't know of any reason that we can't do them together if the board would like.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion we accept the superintendent recommendation for the board approval of resignation and termination for the certified educators effective at the conclusion of the academic year 2017-2018, 1A and 1B.
Mr. Chair, I second.
Been a motion by Ms. Harrison, second by Pastor Jackson to approve the superintendent's recommendation to accept certified resignations and terminations in Exhibit 1A and 1B. As it's a personnel matter, there'll be no discussion on it. All those in favor of accepting the recommendation indicate by raising your right hand. 7-0. Thank you.
Next HR item for your approval are the certified recommendations, where the superintendent recommends board approval for certified staff members for academic year 2018-19, and this is indicated in Exhibits 2A and 2B.
All right, Chair, entertain a motion regarding those.
Mr. Chair, I want to accept the superintendent recommendation for, that would be 1A.
No, 2.
Excuse me, 1A, Exhibit 2, Exhibit A, and new hires, Exhibit 2B. I want to make sure I got that right. I'm hanging blind.
2B.
There you go.
Okay, Exhibit 2-A, that's the current staffing, and the second Exhibit 2-B, new hire. Right on the second.
Thank you, sir.
I second.
Pastor Jackson seconds the motion made by Mr. Miller regarding superintendent's recommendation for certified staff members for 18-19 school year in Exhibit 2A and 2B. Again, personnel, so no discussion on this matter. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your right hand. 7-0. Thank you. And I believe that gets me down to me. You see in there, I believe we've got an intergovernmental meeting coming up. It looks like in a couple months, so that's outside of my calendar right now, but y'all keep track of that. Of course, springtime, many things going on. You see them there. I'll let you go through that. And I know we've had some folks that have recently gone to some conferences. I'd open up the floor to let anybody who's been to anything recently who wants to enlighten us on their educational experiences.
Well, we haven't had a meeting since we went to New York. I had the pleasure of going to New York, visiting with supporting the kids at Carnegie Hall, along with the superintendent and his wife, and if it wasn't for his wife, we were probably lost in New York. But I had a great time sitting up in that box, watching our kids on that stage. I tell you, I got full. They did a wonderful job, and I have to commend Ms. Graham on how well behaved they were. All the schools, you didn't even know they was in the hotel. You know, I go to hotels and grown people be yelling and running up and down the halls, but they were very respectful, and I think they enjoyed themselves. And I mean, I really enjoyed myself. It was an experience of a lifetime going to Carnegie Hall. And so me and my buddy over here, you know, we just came back from San Antonio, and really I think this was probably one of the best conferences I've been to since I've been on the board. I had a chance to go through the book, and what caught my eye was the students' voice. The board need to listen, so you know, immediately I was like, okay, what they got to say about us. So I went to that session, and I met two young ladies, Delaney and Sophie. They did a presentation. They didn't understand the role of school board and, you know, what they do, so they wanted to be student representations on the board, and so they did an application. They're picked by, you know, the superintendent, the board members, and the principal of the school. And so what they do, instead of always negative stuff, they feed the board on positive stuff every year, every month. They do a report with all the organizations in the schools, and they bring them back on everything that's going on, because it's always, you know, we get some negative feedback, but we never get the good stuff that's going on. And so that's what they do. They go to board meetings, they go to conferences, they don't do executive session, they make me know that they did not get paid. So, and then they have a round table discussion with 8 to 12 students that's picked by the guidance counselor. They do it at the beginning of the year, the middle, and at the end. And it's not the top kids. They want to bring the kids in that's probably not doing so well to just let us know what's going on, you know, what's working for them and what's not working for them. And I just thought that was a good idea, and I found out, you know, some of the districts in Columbia already have student representation. So I thought that would be a good idea for us. And they have to serve 2 years, and they are juniors and seniors, and they have to serve 2-year terms. And I just thought it was a good session, and they told me they learned from us, and we learning from them, because actually we don't really know a lot of things that's going on in the school. And I want to hear the positive stuff, and that's what they bring back, you know, a lot of positive stuff. So, I mean, I was able to go to a lot of different stuff, and, you know, and it was a very good conference. But I can go on all night, because I was excited up every morning and ready to go. So I'll let my buddy tell you what he did.
I'm gonna give to the professor over there in the red coat, then I'll bring it over in.
But I did bring y'all something back, even though Henry and I bought y'all something. I bring this.
You didn't bring it to the meeting tonight.
I forgot it. My car went crazy.
Who you bought some back for?
She said I didn't bring you nothing back because you was there.
Are you trying to be smart?
Yes. I'm waiting.
Who's next? Anybody?
I would like to report that, Mississippi Harris,
You can't get it together.
Sylvia Harris' son.
Harris' son.
Who talking about?
Go ahead.
That, this was a good conference for her, because she did, invite me to hang out with her and her partner. And, we did have a good time. We got to know each other on a different level, even though she cut that down anyway. But, it really was a good conference, and not only were the educational sessions great, but some of the tours we took, I learned more about Texas and, the Alamo and the building of Texas than I had ever known. As far as the sessions and the vendors go, they had a lot of great vendors, offered a lot of information. As soon as I could get a chance, I'm going to pass the information on to Dr. Green of some grants that we could apply for different items. And one was, what was it, Mr. Miller, that machine where they had all the different parts of the body? Anatomy? Yeah, and yeah, it helps. There was a grant that you can write. I think it cost like maybe $70,000 that we can use at the Career Center, and they shared that information with us. Of course, they had session on governance, you know, kind of tell us how and what we need to do as far as overstepping our boundaries with the superintendent, and making sure that we don't micromanage the staff, and making sure that we do our proper evaluations and our updates on our board policies. So it was a great conference, and from the vendors to the board members from all over the United States that was there, to the sessions, and then, like I stated, the off hours time that we spent doing some tours.
you know, what I found out was that everybody is making that on that cutting edge. I know we're on the cutting edge and things they were talking about. I said, wow, we're doing it. We're doing it. We're doing this. We're doing it. But I was in this one, I guess, this forum, and that they were talking about where were the children at, Doc? And we're doing it here. I don't care if you're down here. That's where we're going to bring you up. You know what I'm saying? We ain't gonna forget about nobody. You know, we don't want to leave nobody behind. And that was one of the conferences I really liked to school in. I think it was in Missouri. And our makeup is totally different from just about anybody else's. You know, they were talking about they were 80% at the time Caucasian, and then they went all the way down to 51%. But I told one of the ladies when I went to talk to her, I said, try 91%. You know, free to reduce money. You know, so they was making some strides, but it's a different animal, and we're doing what we have to do. And I want to commend our school district, but we've got to keep on learning. But we're right there. We're right there. Thank you.
I should just, one more thing, Mr.
No.
Please. Y'all also paid for me to go to that's one of the sessions that Dr. Elkins does. And to be honest with you, I had no idea it was of the magnitude that it was. What she does is, it's a session where they teach you how to build relationships with the students. And when the teachers have an issue, whether it's teacher to teacher, students to students, faculty, administrator to administrator, parent to parent, they resort to a circle. And they sit in a circle so everybody can see everybody else. And when they sit in the circle, they actually talk about what the issue is and what the problem is. And they set the ground rules. They're open, they're frank, they're respectful, they're polite. And they don't leave the circle pretty much until they have figured out how to work out whatever that issue is. And one of the schools that, we had a lot of mock sessions that we did, and one of the schools that, I think it was in San Francisco, and the students were saying how they really liked it because they was listened to. And one of the persons teaching Alcon, and she stated that students would come into class, she'd look at them, well, why are you late? Well, don't you bring that message here today that you brought in here yesterday? And she meant that she would say those kinds of things to the students. Not to be derogatory and nasty, but because that's just how she talked to them. But after sitting in the circle and watching the videos and seeing how once you build that relationship with the students, the grades go up, the relationships go up, everything in the school spirit, everything starts to increase. And I don't know if have we sent anybody to it, Dr. Green?
Yeah, we've got a couple of teachers in there.
Did they, what was their take on it? Was it?
You know, I've not really talked to them in depth about it, and I think they enjoyed the experience. But I've not had very in-depth conversations about it, other than it was good. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot.
And I mean, from what we saw, and even in that setting, teachers that was in the setting stated that they was going to go back, which is not what happened overnight, and they were going to change the way they deal with their students. Because they even talked about the referrals changing, because when the students are referred to the office, they no longer dealt with the action that the student did at that particular time. They was dealing with what caused the action of the student. It could be that the student was falling asleep in the class, not because they were just sleepy because they didn't get their rest. It was because of different things going on at home. So when that student went to the office or to the social worker or whomever, they were able to address that student's needs and help that student come up with strategies. They helped them overcome different adversities that would keep them from learning in the classroom. And it was really, really, really a good session. And it was simply building relationships. And when you build relationships with the children and the parents and the teachers, then they all work together to increase the productivity and the success of the school. So it was real good.
Daniel, anybody else? We good? All right, I think we covered everything. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion we adjourn.
Second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Next one. Nobody said anything about it. Wait. Yes, sir.
Take some days out.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm gonna read over. I think it's a heat off. Right. How are you? Look, do you wanna go to the Monique now? Having the jazz thing.
I went to Trustees, I went to the one yesterday, and they gave me a pass to go to that, so I went 4 days. Because I
Brett?
spent $400.
Yes, sir.
June 22nd. It's on Friday.
I thought it was just a waste. I just found this one. But it was really good.
Yeah, it's on Friday. Okay, yeah, let me know the date and stuff. I appreciate it. Yeah. That way, he always talking trash. Yeah. That ain't going good. Oh, you should have called me, what day?